So this is Matt Cook. He's the writer for Worlds Adrift. Today we're going to ask him a few of your questions about kind of the writing process and how that all works. What would you say the kind of biggest source of inspiration when you were writing the stuff for Worlds Adrift was?
I think our own world, really, but slightly subverted. So a lot of games have big fantasy elements. This does have fantasy, but I think the writing is mostly kind of on the borderline, you know, like on the cusp. So Studio Ghibli films, you know, that kind of idea of things just overstepping into this kind of magical world, but not quite fully falling into it.
Because this next one is kind of similar to the last one, but more from a literary point of view. Are there any kind of books or writings that inspired you with Worlds Adrift?
Yep. Quite a few things, but Gulliver's Travels probably is the most obvious thing to look at, you know, just because it has that kind of idea of these cultures that have got kind of islands, and you're the person visiting them, and then you realise how weird they are. And the reason they're weird is because they're on an island. It's a bit like the UK, you know. We're kind of a bit weird because we live on an island, and you kind of get this idea that they might have kind of dogmatic ideas about how to live their lives, or they live by a particular set of sort of precepts, you know, that they want to kind of live by to make sure that their culture thrives, you know. And I think those kind of things really should be apparent to players in the game when they encounter the different cultures. Like, there's a kind of a thing, at least one thing that each culture has that makes them who they are, kind of ethically. So Gulliver's Travels, Treasure Island, all those kind of things. But I mean, there's loads of things. I've been reading some like history, especially like Roman Greek history, because I think those things really fill in the gaps where you know, when you're not sure about ancient societies, how they might have lived. I think those kind of things are good to draw upon.
So this next question, I guess, is about the kind of any difficulties you might have had writing for the kind of game that Worlds Adrift is. So obviously you're talking mainly in kind of little fragments and things that you discover, rather than, you know, full-blown story exposition pieces. So I mean, how different is that to normal?
I think it's probably as easy as it could have been for a writer to write for games. And I think the reason for that is that with a lot of games you're kind of wrapping yourself around the structure of the game, whereas with this, really, there's a lot of freedom there for the writer, and I think that's been amazing. But it's also really, really creatively beneficial for me to be able to produce kind of carte blanche, you know, anything. But then gradually, I think we'll come to this later on, but gradually kind of working out how I interact with the studio and everybody else, and
What's kind of more common then? I mean, you're talking about how you interact with the studio there. Like, does it come more from you? Like, you kind of say what's going to be in the game and then they kind of make that? Or is it more the other way around where, you know, we'll be making stuff and then we'll say to you, write something that works with this?
Well, there were a few stakes in the ground to start with, so I was kind of working with those in mind. Obviously, the world's a very particular place, you know, you can't kind of get away from that. However, after that, I kind of went off in my own direction. And now, as we're coming towards, you know, D-Day, it's important to kind of make sure that what I'm doing connects up with what everyone else is doing, and also there's kind of a feedback loop going on with the artists, you know, all the time. That's the whole time it's been going on, and that's been really good for me, and I think it's been good for them as well.
Obviously, the way we're talking about delivering story, we're talking about these kind of fragments of stories that you find in ruins and these kind of artifacts and stuff like that. Is that the only way players are going to be able to find stories, or are they also going to be able to kind of find objects and items that have kind of clues to the backstory as well?
Pretty much anything you find is going to have a bit of lore, I think, and a few clues about how, you know, beyond the pieces that you'll find of kind of first-hand accounts of things, you'll find kind of extra little clues, you know, maybe even bigger clues attached to items and things than you might find in the writing itself. So I think a really wide variety of types of like writing delivery as well. So there's loads of kind of different ways of telling stories, I think. But items, all of the ruins and things. I think there's different types of ruins as well. But lots of variety there, I think.
Cool, sounds exciting. So in the Island Creator tool, we've got obviously a bunch of different types of ruins that are in there. We talk about Saborians and stuff. We also have a culture called Culture A,
Yes.
Are we able to talk a little bit about who they are?
Well, I believe Culture A are the Mellifluens, and I think that in the Island Creator Tool they will be the Mellifluens at some point as well. Okay. But the Mellifluens are a culture who are very flauncy. They wear lots of flowing garments. They like to kind of... They've lots of keen artists, a lot of art generated there. And they have this obsession with textiles. Okay. They have these kind of silks that they dye with a beetle blood, which is kind of a national heritage thing, but bores the pants off of every other culture. That's their kind of stereotype.
So with the Mellifluens, are we going to be able to, in future, discover their history as well?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, there's obviously if you find an island with Mellifluan ruins, you will be more likely to find Mellifluan-related things on that island. And that goes for all the cultures, of which there are many.
So some of the people out there wanted to know if there were any hints that we can give them as to how the world came to be the way it is in Worlds Adrift.
I don't think we can tell people.
Okay.
But suffice to say that really there are a lot of reasons, and that some may be more prominent than others in the story, but there are, you might be squabbling with your friends over which is really the real reason, because there are quite a few.
So the civilizations that predated the big cataclysm, obviously they've got some pretty impressive technology around. We see these evidence of this in kind of lift generators and all sorts of strange things that you can't really produce easily in Worlds Adrift. So how advanced were those civilizations?
I think they were pretty advanced at the end, but advanced in a way that isn't quite the same as advances in our world. Their history was a bit different to ours, and they're it was a smaller world than ours, and so they were a bit smaller-minded about certain things. Okay. So while in some ways they were advanced, in other ways I think they were a bit stunted.
Right.
So yeah, it's a bit of both.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess you kind of covered some of the civilizations and their personalities in the blog that you wrote recently for the website. That's right.
So if you check out the website, you can see kind of pocket histories of all of the major cultures, but there are many more beyond that.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So obviously you've been writing the story for Worlds Adrift for a while now. I guess you've got a pretty clear overarching idea of the story, but how much of that is it going to? How much of the story is going to be dependent on what kind of players start to interact with it? Are you going to be adjusting anything, or is it all pretty much set in stone?
I think writers should always have loose ends, so that they can follow up on them. So if people are really into something, and I think, oh wow, that kind of bit blindsided by it, and think, oh right, I haven't devoted enough time to that, or there's more in that, then absolutely, yeah. But yeah, I'm really interested to see what players like the most, what they hate. But also, I think there is kind of some fixed things there, some things there that definitely happened. So yeah, a bit of both again.
Cool, that's good. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. There's been some really good questions and some good answers.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.